There we go. Hello,
Yes,
Chris. If you want, you can introduce yourself and what you're running for.
sure. My name is Chris Watts, and I'm a candidate for the office of mayor for the city of Denton.
Right on. Let's see. We have some questions on public transit and housing today, so we will go ahead and
Yes.
get started. I will start with question one, of course.
Mhm.
Um, what is your experience using public transit? Have you used things like GoZone, Connect buses, and the A train?
I have all three of those. I've used those. I've also used public transit when I've traveled out of town, was out of the country back this last fall, and I was visiting the city that had a very robust public transportation system, took a train across the country. And so, yes, I've certainly used those here and in other places.
That's awesome. Let's see. Question number two. Accessibility is a big issue in public transit. How do you plan to work with DCTA to address things like lack of safe sidewalks, unprotected bus stops, low route coverage, etc.?
Sure. Of course, as you know, the city of Denton has a representative that they appoint to represent the city's interests on the board of DCTA. So I think it's imperative that we continue to work through that representative and express the needs of the community. And that representative is a city council member, the mayor pro tem, actually, I believe. And so I think to meet with them on a regular basis to understand what the needs are in the community and how she can advocate for us on that board for that. I know that we've over the years talked about bus stops. How do we get more bus stops? You know, they've reduced some bus stops recently, and I think some of that was for public safety or some other reasons. I wasn't quite sure what that rationale was. We were able to participate or get some money reimbursed to us through the TRIP program that I think DCTA board has said that we're not going to be receiving those funds either this year or in subsequent years, but that has often been used for transit related infrastructure developments for the city.
Right on, right on. Let's see here. Question number three. Dentonites have said that GoZone is inefficient, unreliable, or uncomfortable.
Mhm,
How does
mhm.
GoZone factor into your plans for public transit improvement?
Well, based upon the reports by the DCTA president, Paul Christina, as he's given updates periodically. I think they give them quarterly or every 6 months to the Denton City Council. He will report ridership numbers. He'll report different types of initiatives that they're exploring. And I think the last report I saw was that number one, he's consistently said that the data from GoZone that's derived from the GoZone app has enabled them to maximize the bus routes. That I think recently they just restricted GoZone in some areas of the city because they saw that the ridership on GoZone was really paralleling one or two of the bus routes. And so they put a geo fence around those particular areas, and more people began to ride the bus. So the data derived from GoZone, I think, is helping them optimize exactly how they want to optimize the modalities. If GoZone data shows that there's a bus route that would be more efficient, I fully trust that they would do what they need to do in order to make that transition. So I think where I see GoZone as part of the public transportation system in Denton is that they will continue to use that data to maximize where they need to go. And so sometimes that might mean, you know, prohibiting go zone from a certain area of the city because the bus route would be more efficient. But that means they might could deploy those assets, those go zone assets, to somewhere else in the city that is not receiving any public transportation right now because go zone operates only in certain zones within the city. It's not like the entire city limits. So I think that as it continues to provide that data, DCTA has done a great job of using that data to maximize the bus ridership and minimize the transportation costs of each ride, both for a bus and the on-demand ride share goes on.
Right on. We love using the data. So let's see here. Our next three questions are gonna pivot more towards housing.
Okay.
So question number four here is, do you have any plans to expand resources for our unhoused population?
Uh, and I'm assuming the question stating expand resources meaning additional monetary funding, is that, or is that the basic gist of the question?
Essentially, yeah. Whatever,
Okay.
I know there's only so much within the power of the city or
Sure,
city council or
sure. Well, I think what anytime we're looking at funding, we want to make sure that that funding is being used in its most efficient way to maximize the services that that funding is to provide. As you know, and as the community knows, that last summer the city council made some changes to the community shelter out there on Loop 288 as far as programs and the like. And they were restricting overnight stays to people who were involved in a program that would provide them with case management services, and really the greatest opportunity to really begin to be more self-sustaining and to find a job and also permanent housing. Now, the reason for that was, as stated by the executive director of the organization that runs that, is that if they continued on the path that they were on, they would run out of money. I mean, that's almost a quote. Well, we don't want that to happen, because then that means the shelter would either have to shut down or the city would have to step in, and that's about a $3 million to $3.5 million price tag. So it's best to find ways that we can have a win-win with an organization, community organization that's quite frankly more knowledgeable than what the city would be on running something like that. So I think we have to continue to look at the issue. We have to continue to make sure that whatever we're doing, whatever services we're providing, whatever money we're expending, we're doing it in a way that maximizes our services to the unsheltered population. And I've promoted and I've said throughout different forums and different campaign events, we really need to form another committee like we did when I first did some almost 10 years ago or more, to say, okay, where are we now? We went from really not very organized and everything very siloed back in 2014, 15, and 16 to really trying to put together uh, a program and a process whereby people were not duplicating services. We were spending the same amount of money, but we were being able to provide more services than what we could when we weren't working together. We've got to have that conversation again. And we've got to have that conversation again about some of the things that have been happening in our community over the years, like encampments on private property and things such as that, that, unfortunately sometimes are unintended consequences. And for private property owners, it costs them sometimes up to $5,000 to $8,000 to clean it up. So I think this is a community-wide problem, and it's going to require just community-wide dialogue. Are we ever going to solve it, whatever that means? Probably not. But I think we can certainly continue to make a commitment to do the best that we can do within our financial means, and taking into consideration all the interest of all the stakeholders.
right on, right on. Let's see. Question number 5. Rent continues to increase to absurd levels here in Denton. How would you address this issue?
Well, I first take a little bit of an issue with the statement in that right now rents are probably lower than they were a couple of years ago, simply because, as the old economic formula is, supply and demand. If you get a lot of supply and not as much demand, things go down. And we've had, quite frankly, a glut of apartment projects here in this town. In fact, that's all I hear is, when are we going to stop building apartments? So we first of all need to make sure that the processes in place are sufficient to make sure that there's not anything going on that is giving anybody advantage or disadvantage. And one example is, well, I found out just literally a week ago that 3 of the largest complexes that are currently under construction, one's about finished, 2 have just started. When they were before the city to get zoning changes to allow them to build, to get those entitlements, they were properties that were going to be on the tax rolls, that were just going to be market rate rents. And I have to say, when people have asked me, what are we going to do about all these apartments? And I've always told them, well, the market will find its place, because people aren't going to build things they can't make a return on. Well, I have to say, I think I was wrong, because when I found out that these 3 apartment buildings were bought by a nonprofit here in town, it takes them off the tax rolls. those apartment developers get a savings of close to 800,000 to $1 million a year in property tax exemptions. That is no longer the market. When you have people who are able to take that much off of their bottom line in expenses, you are changing the market. You are now in a way of having an advantage over the market. So that's the first thing we have to examine. How much of this is going on, and how much it has gone on, and how is it impacting? In fact, to give you an example, I looked at one of these apartment buildings and looked at their website. And on a market rate rent, a one bedroom was like $1,215, I think. Well, then it showed what your 80%, which is quote unquote what some would classify as affordable, which means you would think you would get a pretty decent break. Uh, the break was $60, I think. And so what's happening is, and that's really market rate. I mean, the difference between $1,200 and $1,170 is less than 5%. So a lot of the apartment developers that are involved in these partnerships with nonprofits who take properties off the tax rolls in exchange for quote unquote affordable housing are in essence getting market rate rents for these projects. And that is really causing a huge concern because we're not providing the affordability that we all thought we might be providing because the city foregoes close to $4 to $5 million a year in property taxes to help these developers provide affordable housing. So we're going to, that needs to really be looked at in depth and the data really obtained to see what's happening. So right now, the rental rates, there's downward pressure, but on the other end, the ones that are supposed to be quote unquote affordable rates, there's a question whether they actually are. And I can tell you unequivocally, when it comes to those that are the most challenged, housing challenged in our community, those at the 30 to 50% average median income, there's nothing that anybody's providing for them. And that should be part of that process. If people are going to get 500,000 to $1 million off of their property taxes in exemptions, there needs to be an accountability for what are we actually providing in terms of affordability.
Right on. Let's see here. Our last question is a cost of living question. So to close us out with question number 6, people in Denton struggle to afford cost of living such as transportation, housing, groceries, etc. What do you hope to see the city do to make living here more affordable?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a very important question. It's one of those, as some people would say in the political sphere, those are those kitchen table issues. Well, let's just get down to the brass tack. A lot of people talk about affordability, but I haven't seen a whole lot from people who talk a lot about affordability of making propositions and putting forth solutions to actually achieve affordability. I tried to do that when I presented a program for the city to participate as a public facility corporation to help alleviate the problem I just described in the last question, which is, are affordable housing developers truly providing affordable housing? If we can answer that question, and if we can get to a point where they actually are, where Dentonites need affordability, not people in Dallas, not numbers based upon anywhere else but in Denton, I think that'll go a long way. We have to look at our energy costs. We have to look at our utilities. Utilities have gone up 30% in the last 2 years. They're scheduled to go up another 25% by 2030. Well, surely we need to have a more transparent, comprehensive conversation about to let the community know how are we actually calculating these costs. Let's make sure that everybody understands how that's occurring. And then I think we also need to make sure that we provide enough economic development so people can thrive instead of just survive. I know I mentioned this at one of the other discussions we had. We talk about affordability from the perspective of costs. In other words, how can we reduce costs? Well, there comes a point where you can, especially as a city, our costs we can reduce our taxes, We can reduce our energy costs. We can reduce fees for participation in certain programs and things such as that. But when it comes to groceries and things like that, we're limited in what we can do. Doesn't mean we can't do something. But I would propose that we need to put as much energy on the other side of that equation, and that is, how can we provide the kind of environment where people can be employed with wages that allow them more affordability, even if somehow we're not able to make all those changes to the extent that we need to make a dent in that. If we only focus on one side of the equation, we're losing half of the battle because we need to focus. How can we get continue to attract jobs here that can give people the opportunity to just, let's be honest, make more money, to have a better opportunity at living a different lifestyle or one that is better than what they are now. I think that's also a critical function of city government, is to ensure that we do have the right environment where people can thrive instead of just survive economically.
Right on, right on. Well, that is all the questions we have for
Okay,
today, but I will ask, is there anything else you'd like to say to anyone? Is like where can people find you or information
sure,
about your campaign, anything like that?
sure. Sure. My website is chriswattsdenton.com. Same Facebook page handle, Chris Watts Denton. I am having a town hall meeting April the 13th, excuse me, at MLK Rec Center from 6:30 to 8:30. Uh, and I would just invite everybody to come out. Go to my website. If you have a question for me, reach out to me. I will certainly get back in touch with you. And first of all, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Those are really great questions. And they're questions that really go to the heart of some of the issues that we're trying to grapple with right now in our city. And I think the more information that we can put out there for individuals, and the more we can invite the conversations, we'll be better able to find a solution that hopefully continues to help people in our community live the kind of life that they have a choice to live.
Right on. And we can definitely link your Facebook page and all that when we post these videos as
Sure.
well for people. But yeah, thank you for again making some time to for us so you can answer these questions for us. I super appreciate it.
Sure, you bet. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You as well.